Welcome to Quantum Potential, a podcast dedicated to curiosity, discovery, and the bold new ideas shaping our future. I'm Sibel Raver, Provost of Vanderbilt University. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Dr. Matthew Johnson-Roberson, the inaugural dean of Vanderbilt's new College of Connected Computing. Matt is an internationally recognized roboticist and computer scientist whose work spans perception, autonomy, and large-scale engineering collaboration. His academic career has taken him from Carnegie Mellon University to Sydney, Stockholm, Michigan, and now Nashville. And he's the founder of two venture-backed startups, Patient.app, a medical AI company that focuses on extracting clinically relevant information for providers to improve care, and Refraction AI, deploying self-driving robotic delivery vehicles. Can't wait to discuss all of the things AI and vehicles. Matt, welcome to Quantum Potential.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored to be here.
It's just great. Matt, you've built an extraordinary career, publishing across fields as varied as naval architecture, computer science, robotics, and even musicology. And you previously led what many consider to be the world's foremost robotics institute. Yet, as I've gotten to know you, and as we were just discussing a minute ago, you've had a really interesting, and some might say circuitous route to your leadership role in computer science, in robotics. Could you share a little bit more about that unconventional path and what led you ultimately into this field, into computing?
It's a really interesting question. You know, when I think about it, particularly when I talk to young people, one of the things I stress is that, life is really long and you get a number of opportunities to do things and follow your passions and interests. So that's what I've been trying to do for most of my career, is just figure out what motivates me, what I'm excited about, and what I think is going to make the world a better place, and then try to do work and scholarship that leads to that. I got really interested in robotics 25 years ago when I first got exposed to the sort of opportunity to take what was computer code and then get it out there in the real world. And there's nothing more real world than a physical robot. And so being able to point at it and show my mom and say, that's the thing I built, that's what I spent all my time doing, really resonated with me. And I think that ability to connect with other people over something physical was why I got into robotics. I got to travel all around the world, and I think as a young person, again, the opportunities that being an academic afforded me just really opened my eyes to just how big the world is and how many cool things are out there. So.
Completely agreed. I love the level of curiosity that you bring to the questions that you're answering, to the papers that you've written, to the way that you lead, even in the description that you just gave. And I think a little bit about one of the papers that I recall reading of yours about being able to capitalize on video games. I think it was Grand Theft Auto, to be able to develop a better model for how to train computers in terms of computer vision, how to understand if a car is going to be driven autonomously, that there's got to be software that helps that car understand what's a shadow versus what's an object. Can you tell us a little bit about how it was that you drew from so many creative sources to do that kind of work?
Yeah, I mean, video games were such a huge piece of my childhood, and as an early adult, I got to play a bunch of them, and so when I thought what would be really exciting was to try to combine that with some of my research goals. And so working on autonomous vehicles, one of the big problems we have with computer vision is that the ability to recognize cars in different lighting conditions, in different weather conditions, and in different environments is actually really difficult. And so the idea was, how can we use video games as an engine to really serve as a simulator to figure out all the visual conditions you'd see a car in, and then train a neural network to be able to recognize that car across all those different environments. But I think that project, to me, really resonated or echoed what we're trying to do at the CCC, which is, how do you combine different disciplines? How do you bring different disciplinary lenses? How do you think about how you bring other parts of your life or other parts of your scholarship together with others? And so that, was a really cool example of using all of the art assets and other things that video games produce and using them in this sort of very hard technology way. So that's my goal, is really to kind of foster those opportunities for others, for our faculty, for our students, and give them chances to do projects hopefully they find as fun as that one for me.
No, it's great. And I love your use of the phrase art assets, this idea that there are assets across the university in different departments, in different fields, in different disciplines. Can you tell us a little bit about Computing for All, this vision that you have for the College of Connected Computing? It's the first college we've launched, I think, in 42 years. I'm super excited to have you as its inaugural dean, as its leader. Tell us a little bit about that vision of Computing for All.
I think it's such an interesting way of framing computing education because, I think for a long time computing and computer science particularly was really walled off, and it had these really big barriers for people outside of that field thinking about participating in it. And so I think what's been so cool about this vision is that, computing is changing so many fields, and particularly computing and AI. And when we look at that, one of the things I hope is that we're able to help anybody that's coming from any discipline or any study think about how computing can accelerate, enhance, improve, their work. And thinking about what Computing for All means to me, it means that I want people to leave this university with doing whatever they're passionate about, but learning how AI and computing can make that better, smarter, faster, and ultimately get their ideas out into the world more quickly, more effectively, at larger scale. And that to me is at the core of what we're trying to build with the CCC.
That's great. And I think often I've run into the obstacle that when we offer sort of a democratized view of a scientific endeavor or a scholarly endeavor, it risks reading as watered down or as not rigorous, right? And yet you've partnered with the US military in terms of thinking about submarines and defense, right? You've also started businesses. Can you tell us a little bit about how the ways that computer science is working now are really around US security and US economic growth, not just about, arts or video games or sort of the cooler, shall I say, more culturally hip side of the equation? These are of very serious gravity.
Yeah, I think when I think about sort of AI as a technology, and when I also think about, what we're going to see over the next 5 or 10 years, you can just look at the last year to understand how rapidly this technology is transforming both our economic landscape, but also our national security landscape, our competitiveness globally. And those are such critically important things when we think about what the role of a university is, but the role of research. And what I always come back to is that there are so many ways that this technology is unique and special, but it can be applied across all these disciplines. And to your point, I hope that we are figuring out ways of truly pushing the boundaries of knowledge. And so as opposed to thinking of, well, let's have a watered down version of AI to solve this other kind of more trivial problem, we're trying to find and recruit both students and faculty that think about, well, if I bring that lens, if I'm trying to solve this other problem that I don't have any solution for, what new computer science, what new data science, what new artificial intelligence do I need to bring into the world to make that possible? And so we're hoping, as opposed to getting a watered down version of everything, that people are actually developing incredibly novel systems that they would have never come across or never thought about had they not had the problem framed in this way. And I think it comes back to creativity. I think, if I think about the greatest researchers, it's ones that really bring a passion and creativity and a sort of independence of thought. They're trying to find something that nobody else has out there in the world, that nobody else has been able to build or conceive of.
The true meaning of breakthrough, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think if we can do that, that is going to be not just good for computer science or data science, but for all of these other fields. And I think if we can find people at that intersection point, it could be game changing.
That's great. And just to anchor it in a specific topic area, tell us a little bit more about autonomous vehicles and what is the key issue that needs to be cracked there? What breakthrough is needed to be able to make that viable? And if we could make autonomous vehicles so much more, strong, safe, secure, trusted, what would it mean for either American security or American health or American economic growth?
Autonomous vehicles is such a cross-cutting technology. So, the field's been working on it since the late 1950s, and really through the 90s, much of this lived at research universities. But you've seen in the last decade a real transition to industry. And I think this gets at some of the things that I'm really interested in. Trying to get things out there in the world, I think research is one sort of mechanism, but also sort of commercialization and startups is another. But I look at autonomous vehicles as one of these really classic examples that if you think about what this technology could afford us. The equivalent of a 747 is falling out of the sky every day in terms of deaths in automobiles. And it's really, really sad because it's just something that we've come to accept, right? We say that this is sort of the cost of doing business.
In terms of regular vehicular...
Yeah, just auto accidents.
Right.
So definitely not autonomous vehicles, not a 747 worth of autonomous vehicles are falling out of the sky. No, so just, auto crashes. And it's incredibly sad because it often actually affects pretty disproportionately really young people and older people. And so, I think those are deaths that we would love to figure out a way of preventing. But the reality is, we made cars much, much safer in the last 20 years. But the last step is how do you make the drivers safer? And autonomous vehicles really do offer the promise of bringing those auto deaths and pedestrian deaths down to zero. And so I think that's incredibly important. And then if you think about the social and societal dynamics, think about commuting, think about where people choose to live, the constructions of our cities, traffic. If anybody's spending time in Nashville here, I think we'd all love to see traffic reduced. And those are the kind of things, those systematic things that are anchoring how we decide where to live, where to build. And more largely, when we think about what safety means, I think this technology has the ability to change all those things. And then finally, I'd say the economic value it's able to capture. If you think about how transformative ride-hailing has been to our ability to move around, that's one example of a technology. But really, that's the same thing we had before, just done differently. This really is something different. Imagine you could go to sleep. You could live 2 hours away, but sleep in your car and get to work. Or you could have an autonomous bus that's able to carry 20, 30, 40 people much more easily than we can do today. All those things really do change a lot of the economics and social fabric of our society. So I think it's one of the most important technologies. And I think the last things we need to do to figure this out is really thinking about the societal and legal implications of scaling this technology up. We've proved now that it's doable. You can go out to San Francisco, you can go to Atlanta, you can get in a Waymo, you can travel between any two places. Now the question is, how would we get that to drive around 10, 20, 30% of the American populace? And those are the questions that I think we need social scientists, we need political scientists, we need sociologists, we need all kinds of people to help us understand, why do I not want to give up my car? How does that intersect with American visions of independence?
Right, I was just going to ask, is that a math problem or is that a people problem, right? Is that a problem of the algorithm, or is that a problem of the shaping of human preference? And immediately I think of so many of the questions you're going to be able to answer in the College of Connected Computing that have to do with working both sides of that equation.
Exactly. I think if we can find people that want to study all those things and we can figure out how to change that technology to meet people where they are, I think that's the formula.
On the next Quantum Potential, the case for ethical AI, we talk with Jaakko Hamman, a fascinating scholar who works at the intersection of faith, psychology, and technology, about the need to train large language models on ethical data sets and the opportunity to leverage AI as an engine of hope and human connection, rather than as a driver in inequity and division. But first, let's get back to my conversation with Matthew. Tell me a little bit about startup culture and how in the College of Connected Computing we can have faculty who might have industry partnership but might be fully appointed within the university, or they might work some of the time for a corporate partner and for us, or they might be the founders of new ventures, new companies. How might that work?
I think one of the amazing things about universities is this real sense of optimism and ability to feel like things are limitless and boundless when it comes to human knowledge. And I think startups bring that same flavor and energy to the commercial space, where people think about what could be. And so I think you combining these really two powerful ideas, right, which is like anything that we want to think about creating in knowledge, we can at a university, and anything we want to think about creating in the world, we can with startups. And so if I think about the union of that, I think there's all these opportunities, as you highlighted. Let's have as many faculty as we can coming in from industry, being shared back and forth to startups, learning what's at the cutting edge in the commercial world and bringing that into the classroom, getting students into these startups so that they have a real opportunity to make a huge difference day one, as opposed to having to spend 20 or 30 years to get to a point in their career where they can affect change. And then finally, I think of the CCC itself as a startup. So we think, blue sky about every single thing. How are we administratively structured? What type of faculty should we be hiring? What are the topics we should be teaching? What type of programs should we be running? And that freedom and hopefully that psychological space to just experiment, to try things out, to really be data-driven, those are the kind of things that we bring to the management in the CCC. And it's not just me, the whole leadership team, and hopefully everybody that's part of it. But that's
I love it. I mean, it's the antithesis of what I think so many people's mental models of universities, right? It's the antithesis to that. It's this idea that it's rapidly evolving rather than, fixed in time immemorial, that it's, not the ivory tower, but that it's actually constantly in the ebb and flow of commerce, and that you're actively thinking about the workforce as a set of innovators, not only as people who might be left behind. I think the narrative about AI and preparing a workforce has been very much one of, let's make sure no one's left behind. But I hear you saying, no, actually, this is an opportunity to create a very different way of accelerated innovation.
I couldn't agree more, and I think about it as both opportunities to figure out how to bring people back in to train and figure out new things that they can do, but then secondly to get particularly young people out there into the workforce or into the economy with new ideas, fresh approaches. And I think that AI has really been democratizing in that way, that a 3-person team can build a product that 1 million people want to use, and that really wasn't available to us before.
Wow, that's a shocking and cool number. What do you think is the thing that's most misunderstood about AI? I just talked about some set of priors or concerns that people might have that might not actually be matching your experience of leading in AI. What's one thing that you think people either misinterpret or misunderstand or are fearful of in regards to AI?
I think the biggest thing I think about is when people talk about this, they're really they're worried about job replacement, and I think that's a critical issue that we have to think about and address. And they're also worried, I think, about the dangers of this technology. And I would say that, speaking of job replacement, what I hope and what we're trying to study and think about is how do we think about partnering AIs with human beings to make them more effective? But also, if we are going to see things that are going to be automated, how do we think about managing that? How do we think about what that means at a macro scale? And robotics is probably the greatest lesson teacher on this. When we see automation from robotics in an industry, what we've learned is that if you visit all of those sort of costs on one community, it's really devastating, right? So if you take down the plant in a town and you shut that community is really devastated. But if you can figure out ways of distributing that cost to be borne across society, and that's through policy, that's through intentionality in the way you roll these things out, and that's also from what areas you choose to automate, I think then it can be a thing where you have 50,000 less auto deaths a year, or you have something along those lines, as opposed to this community has really been left behind. So those are the things I think about when thinking about automation.
Yeah, I think that notion of how to distribute so that it's not concentrated in one industry or in one part of the country or in one part of the world is a really fascinating way of approaching AI. What's the policy mechanism? If you had news to share with Congress, I don't think of there being a U.S. Department of AI. What's the means by which policy in AI is actually translated and thought through? And if it's not at the federal level, is it really through an industrial or through a corporate level? Is it really Meta that's creating policy? Where does AI policy live?
I mean, that's a super interesting question. So I think it has been very challenging to figure out exactly how to move the needle on that. But I'll tell you what our take is, at least right now at the CCC. I think the biggest way we can move the needle, some of it's through education, some of it's through talking to the state and federal governments. But I think the biggest thing we can do to move the needle is by educating the next generation of young people to go out there with a sense of ethics, with a sense of an understanding of how this technology interfaces with society, the benefits, but the harms to people, and to teach them and to have them debate and discuss in a classroom. People that think AI is the worst thing that's going to happen to society and people that think it's the best, I want them sitting next to each other, raising their hands, arguing it out, working up different models for what's the society they want to live in, because ultimately they're going to be the ones that are going to have to live with the choices that we are all making collectively around this. So I believe that universities have this incredible role to play in teaching people how to think and talk about those issues. And if we do that, enough of that, then those people go out and those are the people that are going to set the policies at companies, but also in the government and across the board. And I'm hoping that that's our mechanism.
That's great. I mean, it's so consonant with the theme of Dialogue Vanderbilt, with our mission and vision that it's actually dialogue, debate, discussion, principled disagreement that leads to breakthrough, right? That leads to seeing a problem in a different way and potentially seeing solutions in a different way. So I love that. And do you think that there's the same level of fluency in AI to be able to have that conversation? I think, if I were to imagine how do people feel in terms of misunderstanding AI, it's often a sense of feeling left out or lacking in or lower in knowledge of AI. So just not even knowing how to enter into the conversation. Do you think that people need a certain level of fluency in AI to be able to engage in that debate, that discussion?
No, and I think that is one of these gatekeeping things we want to remove. I think that one of the things that excites me about where the technology is headed is that we're moving from a world where computers and the way you interface with them required really specialized knowledge. You had to learn how to program a computer, to a world where you're going to interact with your computer, but you're going to also program it using natural language. So that means if you can speak, if you can have discussions, if you can debate and dialogue, all these things that you can tell the computer what you'd like it to do, and that then it can help you build that. And those are the kind of tools.
And you don't have to take the coding course in order to have the engagement.
Yeah. Exactly. And so I'm hoping that's where we're going to end up pretty soon. And so what I'm hoping is that people with very little background in this will be able to actually build computer programs that do what they need them to do. And I think the democratization of those tools is incredibly powerful. And that's one of the reasons I see this as a slightly different technological change than some of the previous ones. Many of the previous ones were inaccessible without a lot of specialized knowledge. But anybody can fire up ChatGPT and ask for what they want. And so as those models get better and the responses get better and the sophistication gets higher, I think a lot of people are going to have access to a lot of really powerful things.
It's great, because I think it then adds to the way in which you were discussing a complete reinvention of the university, right? Currently, the doors into the university are pretty much about having specialized knowledge and building upon that specialized knowledge, right? Showing competency and developing even greater competency. And the frame that you just provided is that the door is really, really wide, that there's a lot of different opportunities and points of access. Who do you think are the future students of the College of Connected Computing? Who are you hoping to welcome into the new college?
I'm most excited about students that never thought that technology was for them. I'm most excited about students that have heard about sort of the advances in AI and think, I want to build a business for my musical passions. I want to build an organization that allows me to connect with my friends when we're, traveling overseas. All of these students that come here and are thinking about whatever they're passionate about when they decide to enter, that we're able to provide them technological education and training to allow them to achieve those aims and goals. And I want to continue to serve, our technology students, so those are computer science or data science students. But I'm most excited about expanding that pie so that students that right now aren't thinking about this thing can get exposure.
That's great. 5 years from now, where do you want the CCC, the College of Connected Computing, to be leading? What do you want it to be known for?
I think that we have a real opportunity to be the premier place for studying a liberal arts education infused with AI. And I think that is just a model that is sort of absent in the market right now. There's places where you can do amazing technical education. There's places where you can study amazing liberal arts, but
You're being very generous by not naming those places.
It's a small world, so I don't want to get myself in trouble. But I hope that we are really the market leader and we are really carving a unique path there. And I think that Vanderbilt is so well positioned to do that. We have such strengths in all these areas that I think that the stew is right. And so 5 years from now, I'd like, if you are a young person and you think, I want to study how to do something in the sciences or the liberal arts, and I want to do it with AI because that's the fastest.
Architecture and AI.
Architecture
the
and
future
AI.
you is speaking to the original you.
That's
I
right.
love it.
That's right.
What are you most optimistic about? What are you most hopeful for as you think about those next 5 years, those next 10 years, both for us as a university, but also for this field writ large?
I've been in sort of computer science for 25 years, and this is the fastest pace of technological change that I've seen in my time. And then the most interest I've seen from outside of the field. And I think those two things are an incredibly powerful base to build on. And the thing that gets me most excited is that I have people pounding down the door asking, how do I learn more about AI? And they aren't computer scientists. They are from every other field at the university. And that suggests to me that there's a real need, and that if we do this right, that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we are just in an incredibly virtuous cycle of training people, getting them out there, getting the message out, but really carrying this idea, which is that technology is for everyone, computing is for everyone, and that computing can really help you achieve your dreams. And that's what I'm hoping for.
Amazing, just amazing. And if there's one specific thing that you want listeners to walk away with, one tagline, one message that you want everyone here to think about when they go home, what would that be?
Experiment, play around.
Great.
There are so many things right now, and literally like 3-person teams that are building products that have changed my workflow forever. I don't even type on my computer anymore. I press the little button on the side and I just speak into it.
Wow.
And then all of the words come out wherever I'm typing, my emails, my web browser, wherever it is. And that's a change that happened in the last 2 months. It got good enough that now I don't have to type, and I'm like, great.
A million years from Dragon Speak. A million years
from Dragon Speak,
yes.
which was a government-funded project done at universities, sponsored by DARPA for many, many years.
Oh, there you go. I didn't know that. Yeah. But I love that closing message of experiment. Really exciting. Thank you so much for sharing your work, Matt. Thank you for sharing your vision. Thank you for sharing your leadership with us. The College of Connected Computing represents a really bold new chapter for me as your provost for Vanderbilt, one rooted in curiosity, innovation, and impact. We're so excited to see where you can take us, where you will take us, to be honest. The Quantum Potential podcast comes from Vanderbilt University. I'm your host, Sibel Raver, Provost and Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs with Vanderbilt University. Thank you to our guest, Matthew Johnson-Roberson, Dean of the College of Connected Computing. This episode was edited and mixed by the team at Sound On, Sound Off. You can learn more about their work at soundonsoundoff.com. For more information about Quantum Potential, go to vanderbilt.edu/quantum potential. Thank you for joining us today for the Quantum Potential podcast. Stay tuned for more conversations with the thinkers and innovators reshaping our world. I'm Sibel Raver, and this has been Quantum Potential.